So, welcome again to another episode of Aquatic JEDI. That's Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion in Aquatics. And we have we're covering the globe at this point, I think. We've got Australia, we've got New Zealand, and we've got the UK. So I'm going to let our guests introduce themselves. So if we could start with you, Ennia, um, just give us a quick intro that you're comfortable with and tell us who you are.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Kurt, for this opportunity. My name is Ennia Jones from A Splash of Colour Swimming. I'm the founder and director. A Splash of Colour Swimming is a learn to swim program for culturally and linguistically diverse adults. We break financial, social, physical, cultural, and emotional barriers to swimming. We provide a wraparound service for those who are learning to swim. And to date, we started 3 years ago with 20 women, and now we're in about six different swimming pools across the Hunter and Central Coast, which are big regions where we are. And I think this term alone, we had 140 participants learn to swim, which is fantastic. And our hope is to influence parents so they can influence their children to learn to swim and for a safer community.
Love that. And love the parental part. I'm sure that's going to come up. Mo, if you'd like to go.
Yeah, thank you, Kerr, and thanks again for the opportunity to talk shop with you and Enya. I'm really excited to hear everything. So my name is Mo Jafar. I'm a senior lecturer in sport, physical education, and development at the University of East London. But in my previous life, I was a PE teacher for 15 years and a head of PE. So yeah, physical education, school, national curriculum, swimming is something very close to my heart. I learned as an adult and I didn't realize how hard that was as well to learn as an adult. So yeah, just really interested in seeing what we can do with school swimming in the UK. We have lots of data out there telling us how it needs to be improved, but this data keeps on coming out for the last 20 years. It's the same conversation. So I think we're missing a trick, and more importantly, we're missing voices, especially of young black people, young marginalized communities. So I'm currently doing a master's in research at the University of East London, which is looking at centering the voices of primary school children, black primary school children in London, and also doing some research with my dissertation students who are looking at some use of some flotation devices to support some school swimming. So one of those devices is the swim fin, which I could talk about, but it's probably for another podcast, to be honest. But essentially, just trying to create some space for young people to have some input into their lives.
Very cool. I'm loving this gathering because it's not just the three of us from different places, but the three of us from different backgrounds and disciplines as well. Because I am not sporty. I dabble in sports, but not from that background at all, which is, from what I gather, actually not common in this whole idea of water safety and swimming. That a lot of people do come from, actually, some come from the teaching side of it, but a lot of people come from the sports side of it. And I think it um, gives a perspective on how things are looked at predominantly in the industry. And yeah, you've got that background of business, you've got that background of wellness, and all these other things you've been doing. So it's a very broad range of backgrounds. My background, scuba, as you see,
Yeah.
I'm an underwater guy. Maritime, um, environmental type stuff. So all of that kind of feeds into how I look at things. So kind of just throw it out there. From what you guys are doing, I don't even know where to start with all this because we've been talking before. But what do you, how are you feeling about your journey at this point based on who you are in the communities you serve? I know that's really broad, but might be a good starting point to give us an idea of where we sit and our perspectives, especially we're dealing with Australia and UK, New Zealand. I have a little bit of Caribbean represented in the background. So let's start there. If either of you have an idea of what you'd like to say about that.
So I'll happily go first. I I'm not an Olympian or by any, I didn't do squads growing up, but I've always loved the water. I've always loved swimming. And I never ever in a million years thought I'd end up running a learn to swim program, but here we are, always expect the unexpected, I say. Um, I think I'm pretty comfortable with where I am in terms of providing a leadership position, if you will, in the child community in terms of swimming. I know I'm not the only one. I'm one of many. We do have quite a strong. There's a solid group of CALD leaders. I think people who are leading the way for swimming in our communities. I think I'm happy that I've sort of coming into the industry with fresh eyes. I'm not jaded yet, so able to just see things differently and call that out. I have nothing to lose, so I don't have an issue with calling things out or politely and in a way that's constructive to communication and conversation. But I feel like there needs to be a seismic shift in the way Celt people are taught how to swim in Australia. As you said, Mo, you touched on earlier, there seems to be like an ongoing merry-go-round of issues. And it's like, okay, we actually need to stop the merry-go-round and solve some of these things or address some of these things. And that's why I'm hoping that at least Splash of Color can add something positive to that conversation. I'm not going to solve everything, but I can at least try to solve something. Yeah.
Cool. Mo, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, and you're in total agreement with what you said with regarding I had a mind blank there. It was it's gone.
Is it the
I'll move on.
merry-go-round?
The merry-go-round, yeah. So over in the UK, where I've been kind of looking at the literature and seeing what's been out there before. So national curriculum swimming was mandated in 1994. So a long time ago, and obviously schools would have swam before that as well. So just because it was mandated doesn't mean it didn't happen. And throughout time, there's been some issues with it. It's hard logistically. How do you get kids to the pool? Lots of schools then no longer have pools on their premises and so forth. But what always happens throughout time is that marginalized communities always are disproportionately represented in and affected by these things. So as soon as a school is unable to do something, that means that child probably has no opportunity to be able to do it. So we know many young people will not be able to go swimming because their parents potentially are not able to take them, and school is the only place that they are able to access this opportunity. But they're not able to access it. So it's just for me, it's like why if we know this, and we keep seeing this data, why are we not trying to think about anything? And what I've realized is there's no one in the space who looks like me, who sounds like me, who thinks like these young people, um, to kind of tackle this work. Now, I must send a shout out to the Black Swimming Association because they've obviously trying to tackle some of this stuff over in the UK. And it's impossible to tackle everything, like you said, Enya. Like it's a big juggernaut of a system, so an educational system, a curriculum system, and then you've got obviously, Kurt, you've alluded to the business side of things as well, so swim providers. So it's very complex, but at the same time, if you don't do anything, then nothing will happen at all. So you've got to make a start. I think my space at the moment, very similar to you in regards to I have a kind of naive expectations of what should happen, so and what things should look like, which is good in one way because I'm able to like come and go, why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? What's the reason? What's the rationale behind that? Whereas most people in the industry, I think, and I don't think I'm too harsh in saying this, I've just done it because that's the way it's always been done. That's what we've always done. So I think I've
Mm.
got that unique perspective to be able to look at things from afar. And as an educator and as a teacher, I'm always thinking about like pedagogy and thinking about curriculum, thinking about design and thinking about assessment. How do you know where people are? So the nuts and bolts of the lessons. But essentially, yeah, I'm finding it very difficult to navigate the space because there's no blueprint, there's no like model, there's nothing to follow. It's just kind of knowing as you go. So it's quite difficult at times to process some of the kind of pushback I've had. some of the drawbacks I've had. It's difficult to process why you wouldn't want to try and help young people to learn to swim, because that's what it feels like to me some of the time. It's like these actions you're taking are not helping young people to swim, so why would you take them? But I also recognize it's not as simple as that. It's not like people don't want people to learn to swim. It's just they haven't got them. I don't know. They haven't got the infrastructure or the people in place to be able to do that work. So yeah, I've waffled on there and I've completely lost any trail of thought as well. But it's just very complex situation to deal with. But what I think you can do is starting small and having some impact straight away is just by talking to the people who are affected. Instead of just
Exactly.
keep reporting on the people that are affected, just go and talk to them.
Mm.
And to date, I don't know any research out there that has spoken to young people in the UK, young black people about their swimming. I'd be able to share some insights from the research without going into too much detail. But with the young black people I've spoken to, love swimming. They've got so many ideas about how swimming could be better. They've got so much to give to the swimming community. They've just never been spoken to about it before.
Hmm.
I love what you
I
said there,
am.
Mo, about not that like there's no model and there's no existing ways of doing things. As someone who's eternally curious, I find that exciting because that's an opportunity to create a model that works for your contingent and the people that, are within your community, which is what we've done. So I didn't know of anyone who was doing a trauma-informed approach to learning how to swim specifically for CALD adults. Um, so to be fair, I do have a university background. So I've worked in the tertiary education sector for over 15, 16 years. And so I've been around academics, I've been around research, and I understand like the importance of evaluation and learning outcomes, etc. And so I took all of that and applied it to Splash of Color. So even like the first group of 20 women that we did, we evaluated them. I did a survey at the end, etc., and then used that to go for bigger grants, etc. So I hope you don't. I hope you take the fact that there's no model as an opportunity to create one.
That's awesome. I just want to jump in with the CALD. Mo, do you guys use that terminology as well? Culturally and linguistically diverse?
Possibly, but I was interested to hear more
See,
actually when you were
Oh,
speaking. Yeah.
okay.
so this is a thing that I've started to pick up, and this is something I'm going to be talking about at the Australian conference as well.
Hmm.
The whole idea of terminology and how we look at words, and every different country is using a different terminology for a different thing.
Yes. Yes.
And where one terminology in one place is actually seen as a negative, in the other place, it's normalized.
Mm.
So in Aotearoa, New Zealand, I am ethnic.
Oh,
I am considered an ethnic person
that wouldn't fly
because I'm
here.
not white. That's what I'm saying. I'm not
Yeah.
white, I'm not indigenous, and I'm not Pacific. So I am
Oh,
ethnic. And there's actually a ministry of ethnic communities. We're going to a conference in a couple days for it. That is the normalized term, and that is the accepted term. Now,
okay.
imagine, even not counting Australia, imagine the UK. I came in and said, I'm an ethnic person. It,
Mm.
everybody look at me and go, say what now?
So
You
we're moving
know,
it.
can you give me more on that?
Yeah.
You know,
we
it would,
so we're moving away. I say we. I know as a university and especially amongst my course. And my course is in MReg, and a master's in research in social sciences with social justice. So it's very niche and different to what I'm trained in. I'm a physical education teacher, but I purposely put myself in a social science space and in a social justice space because I feel like swimming is more than just a physical activity. It's a community
mm,
activity, public health activity, and a spiritual one as well. And I know, Kurt, you've got some stuff in this as well. So it encompasses a whole lot more. But we would use the term global majority as opposed to ethnic minority because essentially the global majority is non-white. The majority of the world is non-white. So that's a term that's been used a lot in kind of just in the academic literature, but also in general vernacular in the university and around the place, because we're not a minority, far from it.
yeah. And in the literature, Global South is now becoming a big thing as well. But and I don't want to dwell on this too much because this is a whole nother conversation. Something I've been really confused about, which it seems like academics are now holding on to, is high income country, or was it high income countries versus low income countries? And I've
Yeah.
actually seen things go out where we're saying we're looking for information on X, Y, and Z on how we do this in aquatics. We're looking specifically at high income countries. And I'm going, and I've queried it. I go, what do you mean by high income countries? Because high income countries actually have populations that are marginalized, which are lower income. And vice versa. You have lower income countries where there are populations which are higher income
Yeah.
and have the same access as the higher income countries. So how are you making this distinction? And this is where the term is. So that's without going into that whole realm of it. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to clarify the CLD, which is something which
Mm.
is very much in Australia at this point, but
Yes.
it's not used widely, and we use it, but it's not the go-to term for
Okay.
the public, if you
This
understand what I
is
mean.
this is interesting for me. This is fascinating. So CALD is used here, culturally and linguistically diverse. So that's basically anyone who does not have sort of a white Anglo background, asterisks. So, for example, if
Mm.
someone from Poland wanted to come and join our program, they are linguistically and culturally diverse, even though they're white, blonde hair, blue eyes. They can still join our program. Um,
Okay.
it's yeah, so it's there's that's sort of like the common term, the known term here that you see in government documents on websites, etc. The other term that people would use is migrant and refugees, which
Mm.
I understand they are migrants. I understand they're refugees. But, you know, if I look at myself, for example, I've been here for 26 years. I don't consider myself a migrant anymore.
When
So
do you stop being a migrant?
when do you stop being a migrant? When does
You
that stop?
Yep.
I
you
will always
migrated and you carried on migrating? Have you
Yeah, so it's like I migrated, got that done. I'm an Aussie. I consider myself an Aussie. So why would I still refer to myself as a migrant? And then, you know, we'll get into the whole migrant versus expat situation, which is just nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but this
So
is an interest. Sorry, Enya, to
no,
cut
you
you off.
go. No, go for it.
Oh, this is an interesting conversation because when you're now looking at research and you're looking at evaluations and you're looking at these things, these labels are used, and essentially we have to ask the question: who are we talking about then? So
Exactly.
a lot of the research would use BAME as a kind of acronym, so Black and Minority Ethnic.
Yeah.
So Black goes into that, and Minority Ethnic is just anyone non-white, and you end up having these conversations about a BAME group, but within Black you've got multiple different communities,
Exactly.
like 100,000 million different communities.
Yeah.
Some of the white communities are far more closer to the Black communities in their local geographical area than they would be. So it it, it kind of just makes me look 35,000 foot view. Okay, what the hell are we talking about? And then
Mm,
who are we talking about? Which is obviously the
mm.
always thing. Who are we talking about? And any interventions, any policies, anything that are kind of predicated on these labels or on these data are doomed to fail because they're never getting to the crux of the issue. They're never actually going into the communities and speaking to the people and engaging with the people. They're just engaging
Exactly.
with the entity of the label. And I think it's no surprise why we end up within this conversation. We will probably come and have this conversation again later on down the line and still
Mm,
be saying similar things, but hopefully we can kind of push the kind of like the narrative somewhere else so we can actually
yeah.
start to ask different questions.
Yeah. There's another acronym that goes around, which is CALM. Have you heard of CALM? Culturally and
No?
racially marginalized, which I find, yeah, which I find quite. I mean, there's debate about it. I'm not going to say who's right or who's wrong. I just find that even more sort of exclusive, like excluding. Yeah, I almost prefer CALD, but then obviously there's those who have arguments against CALD as opposed to calm. Yeah. But I come
Yeah.
back to my statement about when do I stop being a migrant? Because some of our participants were born here. They were born here, they've lived here, they speak another language at home, but they would get missed out in that refugee migrant conversation because they're not. They were born here. There's African Australians.
Hmm.
Mm.
And I fit in that category as a Canadian because I'm born in Canada.
Mhm.
My parents are from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, which, yes, I am Vincentian, but I am 100% Canadian as well.
Yeah.
But you grow up going, where are you from?
Yeah.
And that's that specific thing. So I don't want to get too far because I think we need to put a pin in this one, but
Yeah.
thank you both for, so this is part of what I'm presenting on in Australia
Okay.
when I come over, is
Mm.
this whole idea of terminology and how do we navigate this, and and there's a lot of literature, especially coming out of the States, which is looking at, and Stuart Hall, obviously, who is UK through and through, who looks at this terminology and how it skews data and how we look at data and how we look at research, and the interpretation of it. And I think that kind of thing abounds in aquatics. The idea of putting people into categories and going, okay, everybody's in this category, and you're going, there's a lot of sway in this category, and you know what? This category is kind of a lot more like this category. So this leads into something else that maybe Enya, you can, well, maybe you can speak to this, but as far as um, with Aboriginal peoples of Australia and what's going on there as far as aquatics and water safety and access to swimming and all of that kind of stuff. Have you had any contact with that, or have you been very much in your lane, shall we say?
So to be fair, we haven't really gone and done any outreach in any First Nations communities. So we refer to
Mhm.
Indigenous peoples as First Nations peoples. Or it depends who you talk to, really. We haven't gone out and done any active inroads or community engagement in that space purely just because of capacity. We purely are just at the moment setting up. I've just moved into Splash full time. I think I'm 3 weeks in. So it's early days for us in terms of having the scope to do community engagement. But it's definitely part of our strategic plan to ensure that we are welcoming to all people who are culturally and linguistically diverse, including First Nations people. In terms of access, it depends where you are. It depends where you are. I can't comment on people who live out in the regional areas. Yeah, I mean, even though I'm in a regional area, there's more places that are remote than Newcastle, because Australia is just so big. So I can't really provide any comment on that. I do know, I can say hand on my heart, there's a lot of work to be done. I can safely say that. But in terms of
Mm.
who's doing what and what are they doing and the impacts they're having, I can't really comment on that at this stage. I don't want to undo any of the work that's been done that I'm just not aware of at the moment. So yeah.
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 And that question was purely out of curiosity,
Yeah, sure.
where you sit, because over here, that's one thing that I've identified already, is there is a symbiosis, it looks like, um, mirroring of the needs of what you would call CELD over there in Australia and indigenous practice. Um, that idea of the spirituality, that idea of the interconnectedness, going back to an Ubuntu type theory, which kind of pervades over many indigenous peoples around the world. And how you approach water is very different to, and this goes back to Mo, because Mo has grown up and lived in the colonial construct, and approach. So you don't have an indigenous group of people who are actually there who are bringing in other practices. Well, I shouldn't say that, because you've got the Irish, not saying the what Northern Irish, but Celtic, Gaelic, those kind of things, which bring some of that into it. But how do you feeling about that? Because that's a completely different perspective, having not had that around you. And I know that because in Canada, I can say that I was not as connected on an Indigenous perspective growing up. That's a new thing that has come up in Canada. My connection here, um, because of what's going on in Aotearoa, has kind of awakened that side. And me looking at it going, hey, wait a second, from my Caribbean roots, I see connection. So I just wanted to kind of reach out, Mo, how you feel about that and what you might be able to draw from that from your perspective.
Yeah, very different experience growing up in the UK in East London. Like you say, like the whole kind of educational system, everything is very transactional. It's very technical. It's very transmission based. So information going to you, and there's no real thought process. There's no real spirituality. There's no real like other kind of knowledge that would feed into any of the kind of educational aspects or any kind of physical activity like so it's a very different world and obviously being an academic you get exposed to this stuff a little bit more and kind of when I saw some of the talks that you've done Kurt, from a swimming point of view it's exposed me a little bit more so I'm probably a little bit more cognizant of some of these kind of ways of knowledge so like I'm very interested in some of Tim Ingold's work from anthropology so ways of knowing that idea that knowledge is not something that's an entity that can be given to someone, but it's emergent. It's an emergent process, and obviously your cultural background has a big impact on what knowledge is valued and what isn't. And I think we are at a disadvantage in the UK because we have a very narrow view of knowledge. A lot of the time when I see things for swimming and water safety, it's about resources. And when they say resources, what they basically mean is PowerPoints, presentations, posters, like text, images. And I'm thinking, well, that's not resourceful. These are artifacts, but essentially it's the human connection which is a resource. And I just think we don't really put it explicitly at the front and center of teaching, of water safety, of education. We kind of put all our eggs into the artifact basket and just transmit that. And I think that's been a really big problem. It's probably why we have the same kind of like cycle of disproportionate representation in drowning with regards to black people in the UK, and while we have the same kind of this term hard to reach has come out over the last kind of 20 years where these groups are hard to reach, but no, they're not hard to reach. It's because you're speaking the wrong language and you're trying to fit square pegs in the round holes. So and that's actually got an even bigger point because now you put the problem back onto the people. So it's their fault they're hard to reach. They need to come to us, right? So yeah, there's lots there I've kind of alluded to, which I think you guys will be kind of following me with the work that you do in the spaces that you're in. But I just think we're at a huge disadvantage because we don't have that. s- I feel like the indigenous kind of knowledge helps you to just stop and pause for a second. What are we actually talking about? Who are we talking to? What history are we talking to? What history is coming with these people? What are the stories that people are bringing with them? Because no one comes to you as a kind of a well to be filled up. People come with this history, which is really rich and can actually be used as a fantastic resource in itself to motivate people. And when you were saying off call around the parental aspect, the kind of generational aspect of swimming and water safety, it's probably one of the biggest pull factors. And I know the research is out there with Black Swimming Association did some stuff around the voice of Black and Asian people in the UK, and if their parents swam, they swam. It was most of the time if they had a positive experience with parents and they had that opportunity to do that, and even if parents didn't have a positive experience but they took their children to engage in swimming and water safety, that had the biggest impact on first of all people wanting to go and engage in this activity, but also developing the skills and competencies which go along with that. But so yeah, I just think we're at a huge disadvantage because we don't really have that kind of variety of knowledge. We just have a narrow scientific kind of way of doing things. Um, yeah, I'll pause there.
Cool. I'm trying not to get deeper into like a drawn out. Everything that we're bringing up could be a whole thing, series in and of itself. Um, the parental thing. Let's go to the parental thing because I think that that's come up a couple of times. And for me, looking at the historical aspects of it, so I'm drawing from things like I'm gonna glitch on all the names, but Kevin Dawson, um, Osmond, Gary Osmond in Australia, looking at the indigenous transfer of knowledge to Western Europeans around aquatics. And when the Western Europeans found all of these people around the world who were much better in the water than they were. And it seems obvious to me that there was a generational transfer of knowledge. And that feels like it fits very easily in indigenous practice. And if you look at all the indigenous models, and when we've said that they're about models that are out there for this, there are models. Most of them are indigenous. Specifically looking at Dr. Chanel Phillips in Aotearoa, New Zealand, with her model of water safety. And the approach is very, very different than your standard 15 water competencies, which is the wider Western European model. But in all of those aspects, there's a generational transfer from the parent to the child. The child is exposed at a very young age to water, learns from the parent, and then moves in that direction. And I can remember that there are at least family, and I specifically remember sitting by the side of the pool. I don't know how old I was, but I remember my father took me and he dove in on the other side of the pool, which must have been at least 25 meters, if not longer, dove in and swam underwater all the way and popped his head up in front of me and did that specifically so that I could see. And he was probably having fun with it as well. But the whole idea that became my norm. And people around me were normally in the water and they weren't doing butterflies and they weren't doing a nice freestyle, but everybody could fall into the water and swim where they wanted to swim and do what they wanted to do and dive down when they need to dive down and go shoot fish. And it's not odd. Not everybody can swim, but it's not an odd thing to see anybody of any shape, color, form, size being able to move in the water the way they want to. And that normalization that is generational, I feel like that's missing. That there's no focus on the generational preparation. It's more, we shall teach all the children and then we will solve the problem. They're forgetting that the parents actually have to be involved in that.
I'm so glad you brought this up because that's what I'm talking about at the summit in a few weeks' time. The
Yay.
intergenerational gap. Yeah. Um,
Yep.
it's almost, I feel when I say us, I mean us who are trying to break down these barriers. I almost feel it's part of our call, for want of a better word, to remind the old generation that we actually are swimmers. It's not something new to us. I feel like colonization has a lot to answer for. And if you look at most of our people who come from collective cultures, as opposed to individualistic cultures, we actually pass down history via oral tradition. We talk about it. We talk
Yep.
about it. We used to do this, and with languages dying, people migrating around the world, we're losing that oral connection to the past.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel it's almost like I said, it's almost our calling to remind people that, do you know that your ancestors actually used to be really good swimmers? And then there's this gap where we weren't allowed to swim in certain spaces, or it just wasn't done, or people who would have been doing it were, displaced or killed or etc. And so I feel we have a responsibility to awaken our people and say, do you know what? Swimming actually is for us. It's not a white thing to do.
Well,
Yeah, I 100% agree. I'm just nodding with everything you guys have both said because th those stories will get lost. And I remember listening to a shout out to Fiona Clampling. So she's a BBC radio maker, and she made a lovely piece with a lady, Joyce Osei, who was also in Blacks Can't Swim, and followed Joyce's journey to learn to swim again as an adult. So her daughter swam, and she learned to swim, and they did a radio program. But Fiona did a piece on the history of swimming, and like you said, Kurt, you go back and look in Africa, or you look in any kind of um, geographical location where black people are located, and you would see that a lot of white people came over and found out how to swim via black people. So freestyle, I believe, was historically used by black people because it was more efficient. Um, it was more efficient and quicker. So there's a lot of that history, and it kind of goes. I think it links in with decolonizing the curriculum. The curriculum that is taught is very, very narrow and very quite young in a sense. But actually, if we go back further and highlight some of these things, that they become normalized, they become, like you say, Kurt, the norm for your family to be able to do these things because this is what has always happened. So I think you're right, and we need to really highlight these, re-highlight these stories and keep these stories alive because for me, I just felt really empowered and I felt really like positive about many things. I felt proud to hear some of these stories as well because the narrative with marginalized communities, and even that word marginalized just says a lot. Like, but the
Hmm.
narrative is always being saved. Like, oh, we need to be saved. We need to be saved. But actually, we've done a lot of saving. We've saved this world a lot, a hell of a lot, and it needs to be the dial needs to shift towards that a lot more. So it's something I'm trying to do through my research. Instead of being like, how do we solve this problem? It's more like just centering the voice of young people who are already swimming. There are many young kids and adults who do engage in swimming and water activities. And I think, Kurt, you alluded to, it's not just about learning strokes. It's actually just having a space to be in the water, just another space to engage with community, another social space to be part of the collective, to be part of the group, and engage and enjoy. And what I love about swimming, and not just swimming so I'm not talking about swimming as a sport, but what I love about movement in the water is it's literally throughout your lifespan. Like I play football or soccer, guys might call it, but I can't do that in my 70s. I know I'm not going to be able to do that, but I'm sure as hell going to be able to get into water throughout my whole lifespan and have a movement experience, whether that be with my family, whether that be with myself, for whatever reason I want to. I'm always going to be able to do that. But if I haven't got the infrastructure around me or the access or the opportunity to explore that space, then I will always see it's not for me. Now, I'm not talking about me per se, but people will kind of create a narrative for themselves where actually it's not for me, but it's for everyone. It always has been. And so yeah, I really appreciate the notion of, and you've actually just made me think about it even more, is retelling the stories.
Hmm. Storytelling is a thing. I'm going to unfortunately start pulling it to a close. And as we predicted, we basically opened up a whole bunch of rabbit holes that we could probably talk about forever. I even before I'm going to hand it over to you guys to say anything else you want to add as we close, but I'll say thank you both because things like this kind of help me fill my cup back up. Um, it's not easy out there, and it's isolating, and it's nice to be able to have chats like this. So thank you both. But I'll hand it over to both of you to anything else you want to say before we close it off.
I just want to say, Kurt, thank you so much. What a brilliant example of collaboration and just bringing people together and community. This is how we build community, by sharing different points of view and listening and learning. So thank you so much for being an example of that. I just want to say to whoever's listening to this, if you cannot swim, it's not too late. You're not too old. You're not too insert whatever it is that holds you back. There, you can learn to swim, and it's such a freeing and joyful experience. Be prepared to be uncomfortable, but it's for a very, very good cause. So I hope you get to your local pool and ask somebody, hey, I want to learn how to swim. How do I get about it?
Well,
Uh, Yeah, again, I echo Enya's points about Kurt. Thank you for bringing this kind of space and holding the space for us to have this conversation. I'm pretty sure it's going to be the first of many, many, many conversations. So yeah, really appreciate the connection. I think my kind of concluding remarks are we really need to talk to people instead of talking about them, instead of talking at them. We really need to talk with people. And when I say people, we need to talk to people that have traditionally not been able to have a voice. So that's women, that's black people, that's brown people, that's some white people who are in the kind of lower echelons in inverted commas lower echelons, but are seen in those lower echelons of class and life who don't get the opportunity to engage. So I think any kind of policymakers out there, you really need to stop and pause what you're doing because you are ticking your diversity and inclusion box, but it's not working. It's not going to work because the tools that you're using are never going to work. So you really need to stop and pause. You need to put people in place that are really going to engage with the community and they're part of the community and not try and kind of research on the community. And just going back again to people that want to learn to swim in the UK, if you are, I have to send a massive shout out to Annalise Butler, who runs the Black-owned swim school. She's done some fantastic work, and she will continue to do some fantastic work in Birmingham area and in Waterloo, kind of East London area as well. So just reach out to people. And I appreciate the collective, but I think in the UK especially, there's a few people doing bits and bobs here and there. I would like to see a little bit more of an alliance and a little bit more coordination because I feel like people are going off and doing their own things. And I'm looking at a few things out there on LinkedIn. I'm thinking I could have been involved or I could have helped with that. And it's not a self-promotion thing. It's more like I think we could help each other to do what we're doing and might be able to uplift us all. So I think people, especially black people in this space, there's not many of us, so we need to come together a lot quicker and a lot more instead of just focusing narrowly on your kind of journey. Try and bring these journeys together and try and make these paths cross.
Agreed. Thank you both for your time. Really appreciate it. And like I said, let this not be the last one. We'll do it again sometime. Thanks, guys.